one of the biggest things I uncovered was his relationship with Sinatra. Sinatra hated him because Howard used to have these skits mocking Sinatra when he had Alzheimer's. And Sinatra put out a hit on Howard. He wanted to kill him.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Massa's Restaurants in St. Louis. And today I'm very excited. We've got Ian Halperin here, and Ian, of course, is an author, many books. And you've mentioned on many podcasts, so we're going to dig into the Howard Stern stuff here a little bit.
Are you a Stern fan?
I was. I don't listen now. I was a huge fan, 90s, 2000s.
Remember when I was on the show, or you don't remember?
A little bit of dancing, I think, happened during your time. Yeah.
You have a good memory, man. You got a good memory.
So you were only on twice, though, right? You were promoting two different...
A couple of times, yeah. But at length, Howard kept me in the studio for an hour or over an hour. He was nice to me. I mean, and was one-on-one with him. But it's incredible that you remember the dancing. No, what happened with me and Howard was simple. I started going on his show, and then my manager called me and said, the Opie and Anthony show wants me on. And I said, I really don't want to do that. It's not my cup of tea to go in with a bunch of comics. And my manager said, no, I spoke to Gary, and it's cool. You'll still go on Howard, which didn't turn out to be the case. Howard would never have me on the show again after I went on O&A. And then I went on O&A for 10 years, man. I had to go through that.
Yeah. So I wanted to get back to we have, of course, the Google machine is easy to find easy stories. Epstein followed Howard Stern around. Tell me this story. This is a good one.
Did you find that on Google?
I believe when I'm doing my research, I see this one and I'm like, okay, intrigued.
Stern. He was obsessed with Stern. Epstein told me the only guy in Manhattan or New York, the state of New York, who could get more pussy than him, quote unquote, he said, was the king of all media, Howard Stern. He was obsessed with Stern. He followed him. He stalked him. Apparently, he has photos of him from his computer. I never saw those, but his right-hand man told me that. So he was really obsessed. He was obsessed with Stern, Princess Diana, Carla Bruni, who was married to the French president, the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy. And he was just an enigmatic nutcase, man.
So did that come up in your interviews with him, and what was and I'm sure Howard has to be a little freaked out when he hears something like that. I'm sure there's a lot of people like that, though, that he doesn't even know about.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just said, look, Stern was the man in New York, and he was obsessed with him. He listened to him all the time. He said he thought that Howard was a bit of a phony. He thought Howard had a bit of a dark past, but he never really proved that to me. Look, my dealings with Howard were nice. Howard was nice to me when I was on the show. When you walk into the studio, they say no cameras, nothing. I'd always ask Howard for a photo. He always obliged. And he'd bring Robin in the photo. I have nothing against Howard except the fact I think his show has changed dramatically. And he used to mock and make fun of the Hollywood A-listers. And now he sort of wanted to become one and is sort of pandering to them. So who is the real Howard Stern?
And were you writing a book, and what happened? It looked like you were kind of putting one together there a few years ago.
Well, it's all in the Epstein book. I mixed it. My publisher, Simon & Schuster, they didn't want a Stern book. They published Beth Stern, and they also had an option on Howard. So they said, it's amazing because my previous book was the Kardashians, and they published the Kardashians, Kris Jenner. And I said to the publisher at SNS, I said, I guess you don't want this one. They said, no, we do both sides. But in the Stern case, no, they only do one side.
What would your angle have been? I mean, with this, you do tell-alls, you do undercover. Where would you have gone with this? How far and how deep?
With Howard?
Yeah.
Well, I went pretty deep. I mean, I discovered a lot of things about him, which is in the current book. Controversy, Sex, Lies, and Dirty Money. One of the biggest things I uncovered was his relationship with Sinatra. Sinatra hated him because Howard used to have these skits mocking Sinatra when he had Alzheimer's. And Sinatra put out a hit on Howard. He wanted to kill him.
Well, it didn't happen, but he did get someone, right? He got someone who looked just like him.
Apparently, some guy who had the same birthday. I think Howard's birthday is January 12th, and looked like Howard, was knocked off, and they think it was because of the Sinatra hit. They got the wrong guy.
Good for Howard. You got to think Howard's shaking in his shoes when he hears a story like that, though, right?
Well, Howard's always a bit paranoid. Howard doesn't come out of his bunker until like 7 at night. And, but look, Howard's not a bad guy. There's just been a lot of disparaging of Howard by ex-employees like Scott the engineer. Not so much Grillo, but Stuttering John for sure. There's been a plethora of them who have really criticized the work environment at Sirius, notably Howard.
But there's a lot more that don't say anything. And it's sort of odd that, man, it could be, hey, I want to do something different. I don't need to talk about Howard. But there's a lot that don't want to talk about their time there. They just will not.
Yeah, there's a lot that don't. But still, you have people like Jackie Martley, Stuttering John, Steve Grillo. They're more than willing to talk about Howard. And Scott the engineer. Tim Sabian had a rough time there. His father was dying of cancer, and Howard said, "Oh, I think we should part ways." I mean, that's not great labor relations. To me, it's more emotional terrorism.
No, yeah, definitely. Now, this was way before you started checking into him, but I always wondered what happened with that marriage. Have you ever been able to figure out? They're doing this. Private Parts comes out. They're a happy couple, and a year and a half later, they're not.
He just wasn't happy. I mean, had grown apart, and it was time to move on. Howard was miserable, and like a lot of people in relationships, and he moved on and sort of found the love of his life. Although there's rumors about that marriage now that I've heard, no proof, so I don't want to get too into it. But Howard Stern is a legend, and he really broke new barriers in the radio and communications business and set a huge template. So love him or hate him, you can't argue with his success.
And he's sort of kind of bulletproof because he did a lot of stuff in the 90s that you would get canceled for now, but it's seemingly, that tape's out there. You go to YouTube and watch it in blackface.
A lot of people on the show say the Me Too movement would have had a field day with Howard in his show. But look, somehow he remained bulletproof. Him and Ellen DeGeneres, they're the two big emotional terrorists now in the news. I mean, they've both been outed in the media. Ellen is stepping down. Let's see how much longer Howard. I mean, he signed a new contract, but let's see if he even fulfills the whole contract.
We could call this podcast "Have You Heard from Artie Lange?" I ask every one of my guests because he's missing. He's always out there. And now he's.
I haven't, and I like Artie a lot. He was very nice to me, but I haven't heard a word.
So there's a documentary I have in my queue about Kurt Cobain, and I still haven't watched it. But you did write a book about who killed.
Hold on. Which documentary about Kurt?
I don't. So not the montage of hate, but it's something else. Son of.
Soaked in Bleach.
Soaked in Bleach. Is that you? Is that your? Okay, I'm gonna watch this.
Yeah, I participated in the Nick Broomfield movie, Kurt and Courtney, and I did my own that was distributed by Paramount. It was called The Cobain Case, and now they're Soaked in Bleach. Look, I'm not going to talk too much about the Cobain stuff because after 2 movies and 2 books, I've had it to here. But read the book Love and Death, The Murder of Kurt Cobain. It was a New York Times bestseller that I wrote along with Max Wallace. And there's a lot of compelling evidence there that points to the fact that Kurt Cobain did not commit suicide.
Yeah, and my only question, I guess, would be when does this come to your mind that, okay, a lot of people are talking that he didn't. Is that what it was? You just kind of heard this murmur of people saying, hey, this looks weird.
There's scientific, forensic, pathological evidence. It's so deep, that investigation. Like, everyone should read it if they're interested in Cobain. It's not just he says, she says. This is all based on medical information.
And then, of course, the book that put
police reports.
I'm looking forward to watch and reading. And then the book that puts you on the map is the Michael Jackson book, Unmasked and the Final Days of Michael Jackson. You predict 6 months before he dies that he's going to die. You did a lot of interviews for that, but I this is the one thing I think I've heard you say that I was most intrigued by, even 10 years later, because there's so many people now coming out saying they were molested, and you're saying he was not a child molester. There's no proof.
Yeah, I mean, again, I really go on the forensic evidence, and people came out like a couple of years ago, like 9 years after Michael had passed. He's not here to defend himself. Look, he was acquitted in the Chandler case in '93. The only reason why Michael settled, I even got access. I got a copy of the insurance document. His insurance company forced him to settle. They couldn't afford to keep going. Michael Jackson certainly was enigmatic, and he certainly looked as the role of a child molester, but he was a 5-year-old in a 50-year-old body. And all these people coming out, I say emphatically, it's a cash grab, because I really looked at the evidence in my book Unmasked, and also in my movie Gone Too Soon.
The other thing about Michael Jackson that's interesting is the Lisa Marie, the marriage, and well, that interesting. You talk. I mean, a lot of people wondered what it was, and I think you got to the bottom of it. It was a arranged
Scientology. Yeah, they wanted Michael to become the de facto leader of the church. So here comes Lisa Marie, a devout Scientologist, and if Michael would have accepted Scientology and embraced it, Tom Cruise would have never got as big as he did with Scientology. Tom Cruise now is the de facto leader of the church, but it would have been Michael Jackson. But he didn't buy into Scientology.
I mean, when you're writing these books, it's hours upon hours of interviews. How much fun is that? I mean, is it a lot of work? Do you feel like, because then you might get someone who says something and you're like, shit, now I gotta talk to that guy to get to.
You're right. Oh, that's a good question, Brad. I'll say this: I've written many books. And in hindsight, I feel like I've been writing term papers my whole life, and I'm in university. It's very laborious and extremely time-consuming because no matter how good the book is, if there's one error in there, you're toast. That's the only reason why I've lasted this long with major publishers, is because nobody's proven me wrong. And, you know, I'm respected by my peers. Yeah, I might put on a show, and, you know, I play the clown a bit to sell books. Of course, you have to stand out. But I take my work very seriously, and investigative journalism is my forte. But it is extremely time-consuming, laborious. Could be lonely at times. It used to be a lot of fun, and today I wouldn't say it's as much fun, you know, because you really have to take risks and go outside the box to really get the story behind the story. And you know, but once I get going, I'm fine. I'll bitch about it before I even write a word or interview anyone. But once I get going, it's like the first day on the job, and I feel energetic and enthusiastic.
So what's next? How about a Trump thing? Is Trump on your next?
No, I won't do Trump. It's been done too many times. There's not much left to do. I mean, you know, I covered all the big ones, from Princess Di to Jackson to Brangelina, Scientology, Whitney Houston, Prince, George Michael. You know, I really don't want to start delving into Drake and Rihanna. It's not my cup of tea, and Bieber. I'd rather do something else.
But you did spend some time with the Pope. Was this in person? And tell me how you go about.
You did your research. That is true.
How do you go about that? Hey, Vatican, it's Ian. Yep, coming by Thursday.
Oh man, I could give you a good scoop about the Pope, but I can't. I will say this: I met him twice. He was very gracious. The second time I met him, I wanted to interview Tony Blair for my movie, and Blair agreed to do it if he came along the ride to the Pope. So he shows up at the Vatican. I interview him. And I said, okay, Tony, we're going to walk. We have to walk through the gates. And there's tens of thousands of people every day outside the Vatican gates to secret entrance to meet the Pope. So he said, okay. And I said, your bodyguards can't come. He said, really? I said, yeah, there's no use for them. So we walked, a few of us, to the Pope with Tony Blair in front of tens of thousands of Vatican worshipers. And to my knowledge, not one person had recognized Blair. That's incredible.
Well, we'll watch and we'll play this back next time you're on, I think.
Hey, pleasure. Anytime, man. I've really enjoyed this. And all the best to you and your family. Thank you for having me. It's a really pleasure to be here. And thanks. I really enjoyed this.
I did too.